Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second of our webinar or workshop from the FDSTL this year. And for this talk today, we have Dr. Brant Horio from Ekoji, who will be giving the keynote talk. And then we have, to help us kind of keep us on our toes and play a little bit of bass, maybe. No. We have Reverend Harry Bridge of Buddhist Church of Oakland to help us moderate our discussion. So Brant is he is a researcher and is interested in, not just interested in, he's works with AI, generative AI in social media. So that's kind of like his uh, niche and the special focus. And he'll be talking today about AI in general, limitation as well as its promises, and as well as how to apply it in our Dharma School classrooms. So take it away, Brant.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm so sorry, but I know everybody's faces are about to disappear when I do this, but I really want to be able to share these images and the slides, so I'll go ahead and do that. Um, so I'll go ahead and first start off by saying thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this topic. Also, just really quickly as a caveat, I think that the term researcher carries a lot, and I'm not a AI researcher at all. I'm going to try to hide this. There we go. I'm not an AI researcher, but I do work a lot with data scientists and AI, and I lead research teams for a technology company here in DC. So I'm very close to sort of the edge of where this technology is going and how I've been using it in everyday life and at work. So I wanted to share a lot of what I've been finding out about this. So let me go ahead and start. There is a short agenda of the kinds of things I want to talk about. It's around an opening and framing, just to make sure we're all on the same page of what AI is and how this works. And since this is about Dharma School and the intersection with AI, I didn't want to cover too much about AI in general, but very stay really true to the track of AI within education. I thought a short history of that might make sense. Um, and then move on into a subset of AI. And it's where the current field is now called generative AI and large language models. And I want to talk about that just so that we can get on the same page. And then present a case around the deep listening aspect that's central to Shin practice and how AI, at least in my thinking, might help augment or help with that process. I've got a couple use cases I want to share with you about how I see it for Dharma School, talk about responsible implementation, and then the call to action. But before I do that, I wanted to just kind of get a sense in the room of where people are with AI. So I want to do a quick survey. There is a QR code here if you have a smartphone. Otherwise, you can go to this website address at the top where it says join@menti.com and use that code. If you wouldn't mind just going to that site real quick. And right now, this is a word cloud. So just the term artificial intelligence makes you feel what? Go ahead and add the top three words that you think about when you hear the term artificial intelligence. And as you put in those words, it should come up on the screen. And I just want to use that to kind of get a sense of um, how to tailor my talk even more. And once you log into that first question, it will advance to the next question um, as I move on. Is everybody able to access it okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, it's telling me that it says, please wait for the presenter to change slides.
Oh, really? Oh, don't know what's going on. Oh, there we go. Creative, cautious, nervous, anxious, dumb, curious, skeptical, futuristic. Okay, so these are great. I'm going to move on to the next one. I would rate my experience with large language models. So this is like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, etc. And you can go ahead and select which one. I've never used an LLM before. I've used it a few times, use it regularly, or your ChatGPT agent's actually doing this for you. It's not even you responding.
I want to do 4 so bad, but I'm not gonna.
Okay, great. Oh, this is awesome. Okay. This is very helpful for me. And then finally here, the next question would be, um,
I had to put
I
the
use LLMs to help me on my Buddhist path in some way. So seeking information, helping with Dharma message writing, etc., or with using it in the Dharma School classroom in some kind of way. Okay, great. So it looks like there's a lot of opportunity here for discussion and collectively learning from each other. So this is great. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for participating with that. So I'll go ahead and continue now. So this is just to kind of start the framing, right? I mean, what would Shakyamuni Buddha think if he came into this current world, right? We've got so many things that are so different. Life is impermanent. There are so many changes happening. Information is even faster. And as we talk more about Gen AI, you'll see that it is an unprecedented level of technological shift in our society that we've never ever seen before. So, I think there's a really strong dichotomy of the environments of where Shakyamuni and current day ministers and lay leaders and students are. Um, but the truths remain about life and the teachings and what it means to have this human experience that we are in. And that bridges both sides of each world, but
okay,
the
thank you. I
context
can
is
put
very
the that one.
okay. So next one, my promises to you about this talk. So, looking at the word cloud when we started about different perspectives on I want to just level set at the very beginning that there's three promises I want to make to you, and I've geared everything towards this, which is I want to keep the perspective that we're going to keep humans at the center, teachers and ministers guide meaning, right? So humans will never be out of it. We'll never have AI doing everything for us or providing interpretations without teachers and ministers, involved in some way. We'll keep the practice at the center. It's about deep listening and reflection. It's not about the shiny technology itself. The technology is only an agent or a tool to be able to help us maybe look at it in a different way. And then safety at the center. So there's no blind trusting in what AI can do, no consideration of privacy and age appropriateness of what the AI can produce. So these are the promises I want to make to you. So it also seems like everybody's very familiar with AI in general, but just to kind of set things on the same page, I think AI, very briefly at the highest level, is a process of three steps. It starts with data on the left, and this can be text, images, audio, video, GPS coordinates, sensors, etc. And AI is a bunch of different methods. You may have heard the terms machine learning or deep learning or other things, but they're all just methods within this overarching umbrella of artificial intelligence that seeks to find patterns in data. And based on those patterns, it can try to make predictions of what might be next or how to classify things, meaning like, I think this picture is of a dog, or I think this is um, a house or other things. It can translate languages. It can map the best routes. It can forecast weather risk, weather events, and those kinds of things. But those predictions are based on what the patterns have shown. So it's using the past to predict the future. And then based on those predictions, the closing of the loop is that AI helps us act or assist. It recommends options, it suggests a reply, it can adjust the thermostat, summarize, generate drafts, but the humans are always involved in checking and choosing which actions they want to make based on those predictions. And based on what we choose, it's a continuous loop because now we're feeding back into the data where the patterns are generated. So the AI is continuously learning as it interacts with us. So as an example, we deal with this every day, right? Let's say, I landed at DCA, not Washington National Airport on the right, and I want to go to Ekoji Buddhist Temple. So everybody, I think, is familiar with Google Maps, and it's a perfect example of these three steps of data and patterns, prediction, and then acting or assisting. So the data part is, I have inputs of locations and distances, my desired destination. I want to have a mode of travel. Interestingly enough, you can do the trip in 7 hours of walking, which I thought was very interesting. There's data about historical travel patterns at that time of day and on that day of week. You have travel preferences, like do I want to take a toll road or not take any tolls at all? What is the current traffic? Meaning, are there traffic jams? Is there an accident, etc. And based on all that information and patterns that it knows from those things, it can now make a prediction. And you can see there's three routes that were provided saying, my prediction is that if you take this route, it'll take 30 minutes. Here, second prediction is that it'll take 29 minutes for the second option and 37 minutes, and it's red for the third option because I think there's some traffic. And based on the acting or assisting piece, it can just say, this is the best route, and it wants to serve it up. It's not driving your car for you, but it's telling you, here's what I think the best action is, and here's some other stuff that might be personalized to you along the way. But it's still keeping you at the center, and it's basing predictions off of data and patterns. Okay, so now let's do a quick short history of AI in education. 60s and 70s, computers were in the room, right? And they were used, I think, for, this is correct or not. And if not, you try again. In the 80s and 90s, things start getting more complicated, much more sophisticated, much more capabilities. We have graphing calculators in the room. The internet has started. Now we can search more. So it's a library and a calculator and more. And then as we get into the 2000s, machines in class now become platforms. I'm not sure if anybody has done Coursera or Khan Academy or those kinds of things, but there's online learning management systems that we can now tap into. But it's still deliver and check. And then in the 2010s, now software starts adjusting. It starts responding in real time, providing recommendations. It's much smarter, but it's still bounded. It's not creating new rules, or new ideas. It's just sort of rearranging and presenting information in different ways. And then now we're in this current era of generative AI where it doesn't just deliver content, it actually creates content in really novel, interesting ways, and it's on demand in any language, stories, songs, images, code, lessons plan, and it's all instantly generated. And this changes the context of how we learn. And that's pretty important for our continuing discussion here. So as we think about where the state of the art is now with generative AI and LLMs, we said that AI first started off with patterns and we use them to help. But instead of just finding patterns, now we're using the patterns to guide creation of totally new things. And this step of generative AI, it creates this new content learned, guided by those learned patterns. It can create new, and it creates new things, new words, new pictures, new sounds, and it fits those creations to the patterns it's learned. So, like for example, on the bottom left, I typed in the prompt into ChatGPT, and I'll show you some of these things if you're not familiar with this. But you would write natural language, and I said, write a haiku about Shinran Shonin, discovering ChatGPT for the first time, and he's wondering how it might help him spread the Dharma. And it came up with these three haikus, all within maybe 10 seconds. And they're pretty interesting, right? Shinran meets a voice, words bloom without brush or ink, can Dharma ride code? Quiet Amida, he tests ChatGPT, soft, teach through many mouths. I love that one because it really hones in on the underlying theme of deep listening that I want to talk to you about. And then finally, paper doors slide wide, ChatGPT in lamplight, will vows flow farther? And so anyway, I love these sort of little things, but I didn't write those, right? ChatGPT used its training on all of the data and it statistically using mathematics, uh, predicted what words might come next to fit into the context of the prompt. So it generated these haikus. I think, again, this is one of the arguments that we need to think about as Dharma School teachers, that this is the world our Dharma School students, our children are inheriting, right? Which is very, very different from where we are. And you'll see through these slides that one of the proposals I want to make is that I think we need to use this as an opportunity to meet our students where they are in novel new ways. So as we think about one of the main tools, ChatGPT, that's out there in the market, there's several others, but ChatGPT is one of the biggest. To kind of hit home on the level of how pervasive it is within our society, within our communities, within the global community, and changing. ChatGPT was launched in November of 2022. This is less than 3 years ago. But today, as of July, within 3 years, there are 18 billion messages per week being used on the platform. There's 700 million users, which represents 10% of the global adult population. Right? Take 10 people, you look around, I mean, it's one of them is on ChatGPT. 46% of those users are between ages 18 and 25. They didn't go younger than 18, but I think you can expect that demographic to continue to grow, and it's already almost half of that user base. And a growing percentage, and now it's currently sitting around 76% of the topics used on ChatGPT were all around practical guidance, seeking information, how to improve their writing. So ChatGPT is very much being used in these ways. And again, this is just to set the context of the world that our Dharma School students are inheriting. So let's talk about this theme that I believe ChatGPT, generative AI, large language model fits within our practice of Shin Buddhism and how we want to approach it. And I think it comes down to this idea of deep listening. Reverend Kuwahara wrote on the BCA page this idea of path of deep listening, and he had a lot to say about it. And I loved the way he sort of proposed about how we have to keep listening, continuously listen to the Dharma as if it's the first time, really fight this urge. Like, I've heard this story before, I've heard this message before as something you've already learned, but really take this open mind idea of I need to deeply listen and I need to continuously listen. And because how I hear it today may be very different about how I hear it tomorrow. And I think that's the same for not just us, but for our Dharma School students. So I'm proposing in this idea of deep listening that generative AI gives us opportunity to create new formats, and approaches that allow us to deeply listen again and again from many different angles while respecting this Dharma and the ministers and the core of our teachings. And we need to hear it in many of these different ways because, again, life is impermanent. Who we are in this moment is impermanent. So we need to have a lot of options and a lot of different angles for how we listen to these things. I've also proposed that generative AI is one of those tools that helps meet our students where they are. Again, they're inheriting a world that's very different from where I think most of our Dharma School teachers have grown up in. So we have to think about ways of engaging them in ways that keep them excited, the Dharma fresh, the Dharma relevant, the Dharma meaningful in context of their own lives that are evolving very, very differently from our own lived experiences. So given that background, what I want to do is just kind of cover some of the use cases that I've been playing around with for Dharma School. And I think that there's a couple things that I want to talk about. There's so many ideas that I think we could leverage, but we just don't have the time to cover all of these things. So, apologies in advance, but I'm going to skim the surface on a bunch of these. My goal is to make these use cases presented in very accessible ways and have us think about what that would look like. Okay, so for Dharma School cases, I think that 4 examples that I'd like to cover today are one around Dharma messages. How could Gen AI help us co-create outlines, drafts, translate tone, adjust for different reading levels, right? Third graders versus high school students versus early adults. Um, Bridge the Dharma to current events, keep things fresh and moving, and put it in a different context. We have to move, I think, beyond Jataka tales where we're talking about, oxen and carts, and think about different things in their current situation to be able to connect to students better. And do this quickly, make it age appropriate, be teacher guided. So I think that there's a lot to say about Dharma messages. Poetry music, I think, is another way of remixing the teachings, remix it into songs, remix it into verse, invite deep listening in a different form and format, meet students where they are in many different ways. I think one of those ways has to be interactive games. Our children and our students are very much finding themselves in their free time caught between two worlds. The real world and a lot of virtual interaction because that's where the friends are and that's where their interests are. So maybe one of the ways is to transform the precepts into playful choices, right? Encourage inquiry, creative thinking, explorations, and introspection about consequences, reflection on the Dharma. Discover that through play in a very, very meaningful way. I think interactive games has a lot of potential here. As a conversational partner, so can we use guided dialogue to test our assumptions, compare perspectives, practice right view, but always having teachers steering that nuance. So those are four things that I want to talk about. Okay, so the first thing was, let's talk about Dharma messages. Now, this is a really word-heavy slide, but the idea here is for me to kind of show you how some of this will work. And what I'm going to do is, okay, all right, one second, is let's look at this top one. So on the six realms of existence as just a general theme. And the question here is, I want to write a Dharma message on the six realms and how I feel angry and frustrated right now. That's what the prompt is. And let me, one second. What we're going to do is, oops. I'm going to take that prompt. I'm going to put it into, and I'm so sorry you're peeking ahead at this. I'm going to, second. Okay. Now share this again. Change the settings. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is show you what this looks like. So this is ChatGPT, the interface. And if you remember on the six realms of existence, the first chat was just saying, I want to write a Dharma message on the six realms and how I feel angry and frustrated right now. I'm just going to say, can you outline a Dharma talk for me? So I hit enter, and what it's going to do now is think about what it thinks it knows from the internet on the six realms, and this context of me being angry and frustrated, and it's going to try to outline the Dharma talk. So what it does is you can see at this first pass that it tries to outline it, and you'll also notice that I didn't ask it to write it and just reflect on it. I want to have creative control. I want to approach Gen AI use responsibly. So what I'm doing is I've asked it to create an outline. I often ask ChatGPT to ask me questions to challenge my assumptions. So in this Dharma Talk outline, you can see that it's trying to do it for different time lengths, consider an audience, and all of this was unprompted by me. And it sets the intention and so forth. And it starts talking about things that you might want to consider for the Dharma School as you talk about these different things. And it covers the 6 realms and so forth. The reason I put this in here is because I think that what it's trying to do, it knows that I am Jodo Shinshu from other chats that I've done, which is why you see some things here that are already reflecting Jodo Shinshu thinking, like it says Namo Amida Butsu. But I think if it was starting from scratch, it would not know that. And a lot of this would be very generalized Buddhist responses. But the reason I picked this is because I know that Bishop Harada also wrote some content on what the 6 realms are on BCA. So the next prompt that we have here, let me pull that back up, is same thing, but now I'm adding extra detail. I'm saying, I am a layperson who follows the Jodo Shinshu tradition. I want to write a Dharma message on the 6 realms and how this explains the many human emotions that I have. Please refer to this BCA piece written by Bishop Marvin Harada as reference, and I give the link to his specific source, and then please outline the message to me to help organize my thoughts and make suggestions. So now with that extra detailed prompt, I can put that in, and now let's see what it comes up with. So the idea here now is that it's actually using minister language, minister thoughts, minister guidance to augment what it gave for the outline. And now it's going to use the source to reframe it and check on that content. So, there's a lot of things being written right now, but you can see that it's citing a source. Bishop Marvin Harada explains that Shakyamuni reinterpreted the 6 realms as psychological states. So this is all things coming from the piece that was not in the original response that it gave, and it's because I gave it a specific source to look at. And this is how I think we keep ministers in the loop. This is how we keep our teachers in the loop, to be able to add this kind of detail, add these kinds of references, and use this to improve the messaging and the accuracy and the intent of what we want to talk about. So again, I won't go through all of these different things. Now I'm going to look at this last prompt, which is much longer. And here I have the exact same things where I said, I am a layperson all the way down to um, Bishop Marvin Harada, and here's his link of his piece that he wrote on BCA. But now I'm going to say, add in a story about when my son was 4, I was rushing and cranky in the morning. My son did nothing wrong, but my emotions inadvertently got directed at him. And in the heat of the moment, I had not realized it until he said, "Daddy, are you mad at me?" It crushed me and brought me back to the human realm. Please outline the message, include this story, and help me organize my thoughts. Make suggestions on how I can use this net to navigate current events, global suffering, and my human limitations. So there's a lot more content, a lot more context that I'm adding into it, and I'm adding a personal spin. So now when I put in that prompt and I put it in, it's going to try to incorporate all of those things, and you can see how it's changing and enhancing what the response is. So, and it's telling you exactly what it's doing. So right now it's browsing the page again, and then it's going to put it together. So let's create a Dharma message that uses Bishop Marvin Harada's framing of the 6 realms as psychological states as we move through time. Weave in your story about your son as the turning point in the human realm. Give you a talk outline, suggested phrasing, and ready-to-use practices for current events of global suffering. And when it says these things, again, it's important to remember that this is about one thing to guide our inspiration, for us to react to it, but not take it as truth. And this is part of what we need to make our students know. It's what we need to make our teachers know. But it's one way of getting a head start on these kinds of things. So you can see here now, it starts off because I said I was a lay follower. It makes that explicit. It cites the teachings from Bishop Harada. It added this personal story as part of the outline and where it would fit into the narrative for the Dharma message. Daddy, are you mad at me? And then talks about these things as everyday mind states, which it didn't do in the first draft. It talked about it as literally realms, and then so forth. So this is like a great start. Again, none of the content is there, but it's stubbing it out. It's creating these headlines and outlines, and you can now go in and start writing about and using that, and then maybe even coming back to ChatGPT and saying, I think this is what I want to say. It feels clunky. Can you help me make this more clear? And it can edit and proofread and do those kinds of things as well. So anyway, this is one of these things that I want to talk to you about for Dharma messages. Um, Another thing that I want to do though is I'm going to copy a little bit more, and then I'll share this back again. Now, the other thing that ChatGPT is great at is changing the perspective to enhance understanding, right? So this is the Six Realms piece that Bishop Harada did on the left. And the first prompt that I want to explore is, please refer to this BCA piece written by Bishop Marvin Harada as a reference, explain the Dharma message to a third grader, and then I put this in here. And I think this is one of our immediate use cases for Dharma School students to meet them where they are and explain it in different ways. So you saw how complicated and how wordy some of these responses are as we talked about the six realms. But now let me put in this prompt where I said, explain it to a third grader, and here is the link to Buddhist Churches of America. And now when I click on go, what it's going to do is it's going to take this context of it assuming and inferring that you're going to talk to a Dharma school class about the six realms. You want to reference Bishop Harada, but you have third graders in the room, and maybe they may not understand all of the words or how we explain it. So here's a simple kid-friendly way. So the big idea, Buddhism says we have a lot of feelings. We all have a lot of feelings. The six realms are kind of like six kinds of moods that can show up during your day. They aren't places you go, they're feelings in your heart and mind. And you can see here that these links tell you where the sources of that information comes from. And when you click on that, it will take you to those sources just to help you check on how it's being used. So heaven, when everything feels awesome. Human, being willing to learn, say sorry, try again. It's our best everyday self. Animal, running on autopilot. Fighting demon, anger and arguing. Hungry ghost, never satisfied. If I get one more toy, snack, follow, then I'll be happy. But it's never enough. Hell, when everything feels terrible, right? And look how fast it generated this. And again, this is like an inspiration point to incorporate into our messages, incorporate into our classroom, incorporate how we interact with different students. And if it can do this for a third grader, it can do it for a sixth grader. It can do it for a high school student. It can do it for a freshman in the college, and adjust appropriately. And this is all about interacting and tweaking and continuing on. Now, let's say as a Dharma school teacher, we want to do more of this, right? We could maybe say something like, let me come back to the slide. I would like interactive study guides for my third graders to reinforce these ideas in class. Generate for me 5 different ideas. I could make things fun for them, keep their attention, and have them engage with their peers, as well as having an opportunity to be introspective, right? So this is a lot of creative writing to add extra content to that prompt. And what can end up happening is when I do that, let's see what it says. I've not run any of these prompts, but because I didn't want to adjust the memory on it, but let's see what it says. Toward this, I often help my daughter with math homework using ChatGPT, saying, give me practice problems that require solving it in the exact same way that they learned it. And we're able to use study guides, and now she does that on her own. She doesn't ask it for answers. She asks it for questions to respond back to. So in that same way, here's what it came back with. You could do realm freeze and unfreeze as a mini role-playing game. Notice moods in the body and then choose a kind action. It gives you a time, materials that you may want to use. It gives you a step-by-step with the rules or how it would work. You call a realm, everybody acts it out for 10 seconds, like an argue pose or reach for more. You hit the chime, freeze. Where do you feel this in your body? And so forth. Let's see, a realm passport, name moods, track choices over a week. That should be interesting. Back to human, a cooperative board path. So it's more of like a board game. Story cubes, homemade story cubes where on the die faces you have lunch, playground, homework, sibling, and so forth. You roll them and then you draw a situation and then you respond. Or breath, bell, and realmometer. So it's pretty interesting, right? Where there's a lot of different things that you can use, and you're not, again, you're never beholden to the exact thing that it feeds back. I might take ideas 1, 3, and 5 and combine them together on my own creativity, but now I have something that I was able to put together and respond to and invent and carry on in ways that I hadn't really thought about before. And that's some of the promise that I think that Gen AI for Dharma School has. Okay, so templates as a way to facilitate reusability. So what I mean by this is this long thing that I wrote here, if I broke that out, imagine a Word document where you could say something like, here's the sections. So what is the topic and theme? And I can write as many paragraphs as I want on what these things are, things that I want to include, what my objective is for the end of the Dharma message. I need to have an objective for what I want people to leave thinking, what I want people to leave feeling. Who's my audience for that talk? What are key points? It's okay to be in the realms. This is human. It's about finding our way back. What are the references I want to include to stay true to the Dharma? What are personal stories to humanize it? What are the resolutions and the last words that I want to leave them with? I want to be mindful of the realms we're in so that I know how to get out. And this document here can be something that is repeatable because you can change the content, but the sections are the same. And now instead of writing out a really long prompt here and forgetting how you did it last time, you can just feed it this document and say, can you give me an outline for a Dharma message based on the following template? And then it will do the thing over and over again. But it's a great way to make this reusable, make it accessible to Dharma school teachers who may not know or be comfortable using ChatGPT. These things here on the right, they would definitely be comfortable with. And ChatGPT then just becomes a tool that acts on those insights or the things that they want. Okay, poetry and song. I think I've optimized for video sharing, sound sharing on my share, but this is something that I've been experimenting with. So I created a website called the Dharma Remix. And what this is about is me writing a Dharma message based on some Buddhist concept from my perspective as a lay practitioner. I convert that into lyrics and poetry to talk about, in context of lived experiences, what I think that Dharma message means to me. And then I use AI to digitize it into music. And it's not being commercialized, it's just meant as a way of creating something else to listen to the Dharma in a different way. And again, it's an experiment in deep listening. So, as an example, one of the first songs that I did was called Echoes in the Tide. And hopefully you can hear this. But this is the message. This is the blog post that talked about the lyrics. And this is the first two verses and the chorus. So I hope you'll be hearing that. I'm only going to play up to the first chorus line. But this was generated by AI.
Rise up from the depths, born of endless sea. A wave upon the surface carried by the breeze. Each one unique in shape, a momentary form. But the tide will turn and crash us to the shore. But though the wave may fall, the water never dies. It returns to the
Oops, sorry.
ocean where the eternal lies. We are waves of the ocean, we rise and we fall, but the sea is forever embracing us all. When the shore calls our name and the rocks meet our spray, we return to the waters, we're never far away.
So if you go to this link, you can listen to the rest of it. And sorry if I was clicking on the chat window to see if there was any questions. But again, like this is from that Dharma message, created these lyrics with the help of AI. But these are my words that uses the metaphor of us being waves on the ocean and how to live beside our grief and loss, because everything flows back and continues its influences on us. And I really love the way these chorus lines came out and how the AI converted it into music that can be very emotional and be something to connect other people to the Dharma. So this is one of the songs that the Dharma Remix tried to do. Okay, so let's talk about interactive games right now. When I was in elementary school, there was this thing called the Oregon Trail, and it was one of my favorite days of the year. You 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 were trying to figure out how hard, or the idea was to provide an educational self-exploration experience for a student in front of a computer that tried to tell you about the hardships it was for this 2,000-mile wagon route from Missouri to Oregon. It was all involved about involving U.S. expansion, Pacific Northwest settlement. There was displacement of the native peoples, but it's like, how do you think about all of this travel? On the Oregon Trail. So this company built a game, and it was an educational game where you could do things like let's travel on the trail, let's learn about it, and so forth. But here you would have to make decisions. If I have limited space, how much food do I take? Clothing because the weather could get bad, extra wheels in case I break a wheel because there's no wagon shop along the Oregon Trail, right? How many oxen to bring, and you have family members that all went with you. One of my favorite things was you could actually go hunting for food as you went. So that was an exciting part of the game. But this was in the 1980s, and it sought to engage students and have them experience the hardships of the trail. So yeah, that's right. I died of dysentery so many times. But this is a cult favorite, and I love this idea of using it to talk about the settlement in the Pacific Northwest was involving so much of these trials in order for the causes and conditions to lead to where we are now. Some of it good and some of it very bad, right? But this is one of those ways to expose students to that effort. So now I always had this dream of creating an Oregon Trail-like game where we could talk about the spread of Buddhism from India and how it actually got to Shinran Shonin, right? Think about all the causes and conditions from a religion born in India to translate and be adopted by different cultures along the Silk Road all the way through China, up into Korea, through Japan, like the amount of causes and conditions and how close we probably were to never knowing the Dharma and Buddhism as we do today is probably, just a few life decisions away of what happened. So, I was always wondering what would a game look like if we did this? And I know how to program, but the time involved to code a game in the way that I want it to, it's just time that I just don't have. Life is all encompassing, right? So I used Claude, which is a different large language model, and I said, here's a few pages of game design elements that I wish I could do. It's inspired from Oregon Trail. I'd love to have a retroactive feel. What could I do? And I want to call it Dharma in Silk because I want to use it to explore Buddhism on the Silk Road, how it started in India, working its way all the way to Japan, and all of the trials and tribulations that allow me to experience the Dharma as it is today because it was so close for it not to be there, right? So it created all the code and it built this for me. So what I want to do now is show you, here's a live version of it. The spacing is there. It's not perfect yet, but I wanted to at least show you what it could do. And some of the rules, and again, AI built all of this for me. It's called vibe coding. But I click on begin new journey. I have this idea of different types of people that can be on my caravan, and they all give me a different kind of advantage as I encounter different challenges. I may find teachings along the way that might improve my Dharma points score. And the Sutra Scribe will help clarity so that I can get extra points as I view teachings along the way. Food will go down, so maybe I can conserve food better if I have a cook. If I get hurt or injured, I have a healer so that I don't die along the trail. Have somebody to help assimilate the teachings into new cultures as I encounter them, and somebody that's a veteran monk to be able to uh, keep my persistence in it. So I may do like a cook and a scribe, and let's do a translator, and I click on begin the journey. And now what I did was I used ChatGPT to create images for my game, and I put it into the Claude code. And now you can see I've got stats for the journey. How far along the 4,000-mile Silk Road am I? Where am I right now? What day is it? The Dharma points that I'm collecting, my supplies, my food, my money. I have a journal that I can see all the actions that are happening. And all of this was built by me interacting with Claude and saying, I'd love to have this. So I could do things like, let's continue the journey. And then I don't have graphics here yet, but I'm going to temple ruins. I want to press onward. I'm going to press onward. I'm going to, and then I get to the next town, Gandhara. So this is a way of getting to along the Silk Road, and the idea is to make it very, very difficult, very hardship driven. But again, it's to help the students interact with what might be a very stale lesson plan about here's the Silk Road, why that's important to the spread of Buddhism. Why not let them live it? And that's the point of this interactive game. Okay. I'm looking at the time. I'm going to keep going. So now use cases for Dharma School, conversational partner. So one of the things that I want to talk about before I get to that use case is that there's something now that LLMs are evolving toward called agentic systems. And all this means is, can I have specialized bots or specialized functions that go do different things for me? And guess what? It's already here. If you have Alexa or if you have other things like that, you've probably already had some kind of messages thrown at you. Hey, I think you might be out of cereal. Would you like me to order more? Right? These are all agents that are doing these things. And when I say agents, it just means somebody who is specialized, a computer program that is specialized to do a specific thing. So let's take this map again from Washington National Airport to Ekoji. And instead of me using Google Maps and using that just for information and predictions, and then me just driving on my own, I'm going to say, I need to get to Ekoji Buddhist Temple from the airport, but I don't have my car, and I'm not sure what the best, meaning cheapest and fastest option is. Can you help me? And now the agentic system, and again, this kind of thing is already here, would say, I've looked at several on-demand services, and it looks like Uber at this time of day is the cheapest option. Would you like me to book your travel? And if I said yes, it would go ahead and book it. So what's happening is you have this one agent here that's connecting with you, the human. It could be ChatGPT or Siri or Amazon Alexa. And based on what we tell it from this prompt here, it now connects a whole line, a workflow with different agents. It connects to a map agent to figure out how far things are. It connects to a travel agent that looks at Uber and Lyft, for example. And then if I want to buy it, it also connects to an agent that connects with payment options. So your account on PayPal or Venmo or Apple Pay. And it strings all these things up for you automatically. And this is called an agentic workflow on the bottom. So let's take this idea now of where LLMs are with these kinds of workflows. And let's say, what if Shakyamuni and Shinran could discuss current events, right? What is a complex current event that I could reevaluate and challenge my assumptions by deeply listening to the perspectives of Shakyamuni Buddha and Shinran Shonin, as they debate each other? So it could say something like, hey, let's dig in. Let's find a current event that you would like to see, hear the discourse from each, present the results in the table for comparative viewpoints, and then I'll go ahead and ask questions that might be helpful in challenging your own assumptions and view. So instead of mapping out and booking Uber or Lyft, it could do something like saying, let me connect with the internet and these news sources. Let me orchestrate a step-by-step workflow so that I can do this and feed it back to you. And I built a workflow like this. Again, it's not perfect. I didn't get a chance to fully test this out. But what it tries to do is detect and rank the news. Hey, scan major stories, figure out which exemplifies dukkha, rank them by human impact, timeliness, strength, and relevance, select an event with me in the loop, prepare the debaters, so two interpretive voices from Shakyamuni, which is covering foundational Buddhism, and Sunran Shonin, which is really about other power and Amida-inspired compassion. And then pick some themes based on that story that they can talk about and briefly explain why each applies, conduct a debate where they present a viewpoint and then they kind of have a conversation together, just trading viewpoints. Let's synthesize the results with an executive summary. I want a table, and I want a set of Socratic questions so that I can reflect on that. And then I can review and publish, meaning let's perform a safety and accuracy check and so forth. So I've built an agent to be able to do all that. And what I can do is, it's going to take a little while, so I'll keep moving on for interest of time. So I'll say, please run this workflow. And right now what it's doing is it's thinking. And once we kick it off, we'll go ahead, finish the presentation, and we'll come back and see what Shakyamuni and Shimnan think about a given current event. So I think we just need to pick one. Mas, we're at 12:55. I'm going to have just 5 more minutes. I know I can get through the rest of the slides.
Yeah, you're okay. You're still good.
Great. Okay, so it's returning some. So now this is, it's telling you live right now all the things that it's doing. So it just looked at Reuters. Now it's looking at Trump calls for an end to the bombing in Gaza. But you can see the things that it's doing. The agent is reopening the task after it looked at all the news. And is stepping through each of those steps that I talked about. And this is the kind of thing where, you know, we may want to do, like, let's say we put this in front of students, we wouldn't want to have some sort of interaction to be able to vet and, you know, think about appropriate topics based on the age that they could then use for self-reflection. But you can see, like, these are things that are going on in the world. Oftentimes, I think people ask our ministers, how do I think about this? I feel helpless. I feel like there's so much global suffering. What is the Buddhist perspective on it? And again, it's not providing a replacement of ministers, but the idea is, can it ask you questions that you can then have a more meaningful chat with your lay leaders, with your ministers about how you're feeling, help you articulate your words, help you articulate your perspectives, and then go seek out truth from the people who know the most about this. This is the way that I view these things, of keeping Dharma at the core, ministers at the core. Looks like it's picking a lot of results here. So actually, so just to move on, I'll come back to this and see where it is. But let's go ahead and finish off the slides. Okay, so responsible implementation. You know, I think the kicker line on the bottom is what we need to think about for the opportunities of Gen AI in the classroom. It's about people first, it's practice first, it's safety always. And AI is a co-pilot, but we steer, right? So in terms of humans in the loop, and when I say in the loop, I'm just saying we are involved in the process. AI is not dictating. We use our interaction with AI to draft, to verify, contextualize, reflect, attribute, and so forth. We need to have teacher-minister guardrails, no personally identifiable information, make sure it's age appropriate, that there's doctrinal fidelity, that there's bias checks, source checks, it's accessible to their classrooms, that there's student norms that we establish, that we talk to them about using AI to learn, not to copy. We use AI to question and discuss. We use AI to keep people safe in how we use it, and we use it to ensure that we keep our speech kind. We establish red lines and do nots, no personal data, no private images, no location information, no presenting what comes back or you know, as a revision as canon. We label the remixes appropriately. We don't outsource AI's guidance or counseling. That we establish transparency and accountability, that we share AI materials with parents and guardians if they request it. We keep a prompt log or revisions log for what's used in class as Gen AI use increases, and we follow applicable child privacy rules and temple policies. But I think these are all the beginnings of what responsible use of Gen AI in the classroom is about. And I think that feeds into my last slide, which is about a call to action. And I think it's some of the things that we could get started on right now is maybe some teachers are not comfortable using Gen AI at all. It should not mean that the creative outputs of Gen AI by others who know how to use it better won't be accessible to them. I think we create a repository of these artifacts to create and share those, generate feedback, scale the impact of the most successful things. You know, we have a very broad, diverse Sangha across the US. Again, for deep listening, how do we share and scale that impact of all of these different ways of listening to the Dharma? For responsible use, all the points that I put up on the slide before, I think this needs to become part of a BCA formalized AI policy guide for ministers, teachers, and students and laypersons on this path. And present these kinds of things at conferences to generate discourse across our community, to meet, talk, evolve, and adapt. I think the Dharma and the delivery of the Dharma was always meant to evolve and adapt. The truths don't change, but how we deliver that should evolve and adapt because everything is impermanent. So I feel like we have to have this continued discourse within the community, and we should never stop adapting. Again, like these two things, these two will change. Let's check one more time and see where this Dharma talk thing is. Okay, I should not run the process past step 1 until the user approves. So detect and so I'm going to say, let's use the Russian strike use article. Proceed to step 2. And continue to the end of the workflow. So now that I've just chosen an article that I saw there, I'm just going to have it go through and run the rest of it, and then we can continue with questions with the programming, and we can come back.
All right.
Thanks very much. That's it.
All right, Brant, thank you very, very much for that huge brain dump of things to talk about and think about. It's got a huge amount. So I'd like to call on Reverend Harry Bridge to kind of lead us. Reverend Bridge, I'll leave it up to you. You can actually make a little statement to get us going, but then I could open the floor up for questions. So, Sensei, which would you like to do?
Sure, I think. Oh, hold on a sec. Sure. I think let's just open it up for questions for now. I have a feeling there will be reactions and questions and comments, and then I've definitely got things I can talk about or say, but if nobody asks, then I can.
Let's do that. So if anybody has a question, please, if it's okay if you just unmute and ask the question, but if you like, you can raise the hand as well. So feel free to unmute. Anybody have a question?
No, I don't have a question, but thank you very much for such a interesting topic. I was a little scared about AI, but I'm starting to use it a little bit more for my, regular, for work or.
Sure.
I think we can definitely use it for anything really, and we should be open to it.
Thank you. Stacy has a question. I'll let Sensei moderate.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Go ahead, Stacy.
Should I go? Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Brant. I'm particularly thought your Dharma and Silk game is such a cool tool. Just I could imagine. I teach middle school students, so not in Dharma School, like my regular job. I'm a middle school teacher, and I just think that is really a great age-appropriate way to help them take a historical situation and have to really think on their own about, think about all the different perspectives and the sort of the players of a time period. And I just think that was a great demonstration. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was just wondering about your knowledge, if you could help share with me and all of the people in the Zoom room today, like about the environmental impacts of generative AI, the water use and the energy use, and also just about like how, if a student were to enter a prompt but not have the training that you had. Like I know it was very cool how you demonstrated that when you entered a prompt, you had an article that you were referencing, in this case, like Bishop Harada's talk. But if a student doesn't have that, is there any way for them to tell where their sources are coming from?
So it's very, very difficult, I think, to tease apart where all the information is coming from, which is why I was saying we have to keep ministers and teachers and lay leaders who know more about it at the core. I think the more you know about a particular topic, the better and more efficiently you're able to engage something like this, because ultimately it comes down to these policies and guidelines, right? I think unless it's really spelled out as this is a thing that you need to think about, where don't take it as doctrine for what gets fed back, but to question it, or instead of feeding back facts, because AI can do something called hallucination, which is very matter of fact, right? It's like, hey, no, you should definitely ride a unicorn because they are the most efficient form of travel, right? And it'll state it as a fact, but we know that's not true. So I think the more we're able to approach it with a clear head and as something to attach it to things that we've learned about, we're going to be able to, again, use that for inspiration and how to carry that on. ChatGPT also has something called an option on it called deep research, which actually scans the entire internet for sources, and it will feed back a report based on all these questions or perspectives or contexts that you plug in, and it will give you back all of these sources and tell you about what they're about. And you can use that to kind of go to these different sources, vet check it yourself, and then you can feed that back in. So it's a very iterative process, right? The way I think about it is like I think I've told this story before in our temple, where like my favorite thing to do as a kid was go to the library and pick a volume off the shelf for the World Book and open to a random page and like read about something, which then like went to something else and something else, and that evolved to Wikipedia, right? But then you would find this information, see how it's connected to other things, and then use that as a step for the next thing in the process. Same process of critical thinking. And if anything, again, this is the world our children are going to inherit, but we have to teach them critical thinking skills, and we have to get them to think about how to question and not take as fact. There's a lot of research that's starting to come out on the social science side in terms of impact of using AI. And one of the most interesting ones that just came out a couple months ago did a study on people who were rated as creative thinkers and problem solvers and some on the opposite end of the spectrum. And taking those two groups gave them a task to do with Gen AI and without. And the bottom line was that it found that the people on the lower creativity and critical thinking side of the spectrum had zero improvement because of Gen AI. They weren't able to creatively use the prompts or think about things, and it didn't improve their performance. But for the creative thinkers, it significantly improved what the outcomes were. So it actually highlights like a potential problem coming up where Gen AI is going to exacerbate the intellectual gap between people who are creative and critical thinkers and not. So we have to like raise that floor up. And I think us being able to do that in context of Buddhism is going to be very important.
Right.
And just really briefly on the environmental piece, Pandora's box is open, right? I think it has a dramatic environmental impact. But just as with any advancement in technology, we often move almost very foolishly ahead of policy. But I think what's going to happen is models are currently in the research field getting pushed to be more and more efficient, use less power, use less resources. So what you see in terms of impact, I don't suspect that we're going to stand by. I feel like technology will help mitigate those things, but it's a very long process, and I think it's also policy driven. So it also depends on leadership and how things are going to be driven in this country and elsewhere in the world.
Well, I just drove down to San Jose yesterday, and I feel like I saw at least one billboard addressing, saying we're using less resources and stuff. So it seems like a kind of a dynamic with the environment.
Sure.
Yeah. And just back to the Stacy's other question. Personally, I feel like Buddhism has a critical aspect to it. Not all kinds of Buddhism, but that kind of self-reflection, but also questioning my understanding of what I see. I think we can extend that to questioning what's being fed to me. And so, maybe this is, in a way, maybe a spin on it would be recognizing the potential errors and pitfalls of AI and moving ahead with that in mind. Right. And always questioning what we're fed, but not throwing it away because, it's not perfect or whatever. So, yeah, kind of a backdoor kind of message, and encouraging our kids that if you're using it, don't just take it for face value, but question. Yeah.
Yeah, very much. I think Reverend Adams, you have
Reverend Adams.
Yeah, I think my question sort of ties in with this idea of critical thinking. The thing that when I use it a lot for translation, like to check my translations when I translate things, and so I'll write something in Japanese, or when I'm writing in Japanese, I'll write something in Japanese, then I'll feed it to. I use a Claude, and it'll sort of fix it up for me. And by the end, it's like, this is perfect Japanese. This is a great way to express a Buddhist sentiment, totally suitable for the audience. This is ready to go. And then I always give it to my wife, who's a native Japanese speaker, to revise. And like if it's a newsletter article, maybe a page in Japanese, just 3 hours. Then after Claude has told me, this is perfect. You are an amazing Japanese speaker. And it has that kind of tendency to make you feel like, wow, I use this tool and it gives me superpowers and I can do all these things. But the reality is that, it's not necessarily, it's the kind of the model in a sense is sort of building you up and making you feel like I can do all these things with this. But, I think that's all the more important to have that critical sense of like with writing, like English writing, like it'll tell me this is great. And I'm like, no, that's not great. And like, I know, I have a sense as an English writer. Japanese, I'm not a native speaker. I'm never going to probably be at that point. But so I think that's where I kind of see the limitations. And like with Buddhism stuff too, something that you really know, it's like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. But there's somehow I feel like we're also opening up insight into, wow, there are things that human insight offers that I think it's sort of clarifying that, wow, there's something that just basically like human. I think of it in a way kind of like food, like, 50 years ago, it was like, wow, we can like use factories to make all this delicious, cheap food that has an amazing shelf life. And now we're sort of like come out the other end. It's like, no, actually, we don't want to eat that stuff. It doesn't taste as good as something that was grown in someone's backyard and, cooked using the recipe that's been handed down for, a century within this family.
Yeah. So that aspect of what you're talking about, it's called sycophancy. And it's a big aspect of current AI research too, about its impact on like how it biases you to accept the outcomes more than you probably should, right? And especially when agentic use is being done to to daisy chain out decision making and action, right? Depending on the use case. Like for example, for the military, right? That has huge consequences. Maybe less so for me to take Lyft and Uber, right? But the sycophancy part is definitely something that needs to be looked at. And again, this is a situation of technology moving rapidly because of push by leaders, but policy struggling to keep up. And policy needs to be based on research. And I think that brings up two things for me. One is you need to break it in order to have perspective on how to control it or how to guardrail it, right? We can't be responsible for telling people what to do or not to do with it or appropriate use unless we explore it and experiment with ourselves. Because otherwise we're approaching it very naively and frankly very ignorantly because we won't know all of the things that it can do. So we have to play with it, we have to break it. And if this is where the students are, we need to be able to also, be at that level with them in terms of environment. I think the other thing is, in terms of like, hey, this is the perfect Japanese translation. I totally agree. Like there are things it's going to tell you it's great at, but it's really not. And there's going to be, I think, a context for what's really, really great for this. I think the way I've phrased some of these use cases, it's tried to gear toward like what it might be better at than just saying like should pick this food, it's great. And as an example, when I talk about having it ask questions of me, as in that very, very blunt, overly honest friend that says, hey, just want to ask you a really blunt question here. And it challenges your assumptions right away. That's the kind of thing that this can also do on demand for a different topic. When I was first writing a Dharma message around this idea of 6 realms and referencing Bishop Parada and frustration of a lot of things going on in the world and feeling very helpless and feeling burnt out about it, near the beginning of the year, I was sort of expressing these thoughts. And when I asked it to challenge my assumptions, one of the questions it gave back was around the idea of saying, look, when you go into an argument for somebody who may be on an opposite side of agreement with you, how do you approach that? Are you going into that conversation to listen, or are you going into that conversation to win? Right? That's a really deep thought from an AI generated response that was not giving me an answer, but it was giving me a self-reflective lens to think about my assumptions in a different way. And I think in that case, the context and the use case of Gen AI and that use is really appropriate and very, very effective. And I think it made like how I want to think about things very different.
Stacy, we're going to respond to something related to this? No? Okay. Thanks, Brant. To me, the thing to me, like you're getting the AI to give you question you, to me is very sophisticated use of it that I'm not convinced a lot of people are going to be doing. They want to have their answer kind of reinforced. They're not looking for
and then going back to the call for action on that repository that I proposed for FDSTL, imagine that Word document template that I talked about, right? You could have the fields that somebody who wants to learn more about a particular topic can put in the references from different ministers or temple newsletters or whatever, the topic, the context of how they want to evaluate that. But on the bottom, we have tried and tested true prompts from this process of trying to break it from some other people across our community. And they put that into a structured prompt at the bottom so that when somebody else uses it, they're getting the same kind of benefit that we got of this, this use that you talked about as being, very nuanced and saying, ask me questions, challenge me, be brutally honest. I know you're just a machine, but I want to be more introspective and think about things differently, right? That's how this whole idea came for this. I wonder what would happen if Shakyamuni and Shimon met on the street. And here's this thing about this Russian bombing. How would they talk about it? Not to overpower each other, but just how would they talk about it, right? From an other power sense versus foundational Buddhism. And if I look at it from a comparative lens, does that change how I might think about it for myself? So that's kind of what it did. And the results are up in case people want me to share the screen. But that was the other thinking behind of how I really think ChatGPT and LLMs are good for questioning ourselves and questioning our assumptions.
Can we maybe take Stacy's question?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Oh, actually, and I just wanted to say, just a little segue, Brant. Yeah, I think that your template model was really a cool idea. I think that's something that is, as a writing teacher, I could see like really helping students to learn how to do that well, you know, right? And I could see that being a very useful tool for them that they could apply, you know, and it will stick with them. But my question was about sort of best practices. You know, I know somebody who made a book using Chat GPT, and you know, and I kind of, I'll be honest, I didn't really like that she was kind of saying, I made the book. Like she has just her name on it. She didn't draw the pictures. You know, I was just wondering, like, what is the best practice to teach students, like about giving credit? And it's sort of, it is a Buddhist lesson about, you know, interdependence. Like you created something, but what about giving credit to all the people who helped you do it, really? So I was just wondering what you do with that.
I think that is a excellent point. I think, and this is where a lot of the lawsuits and current things, like for example, the AI music that you heard that I generated, that's from a company called Suno. And the truth and the consequences of how that model was built, you'll never be able to separate the two, right? But the legal argument right now is saying you use that model to train on copyrighted materials without asking the artist permission. And the other side of the argument is just as somebody who wants to start a garage band, inspired by other musicians, they never asked them permission as well. And they learned from the style and the things that they heard in order to emulate them or build from it. So what came in comes out very differently, but it was started from the inspiration of what they had heard and learned. And that learning process and that argument is that the computer is doing that exact same thing, just at scale and way larger scale than is humanly possible, right? At the same time, I feel like you have to make attributions and say this part of it was generated with Gen AI, right? I think where to look at where this is evolving is you look to academia. So conferences, publications, journals, they have explicit clauses in their policies now where it's like you have to disclose where was Gen AI used and in what way, and so that readers know that these parts of it were either assisted by or completely generated by, right? So that part of it definitely needs to be done there. But yeah, I think the attribution thing is very important.
Yeah. Can I jump off that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's heard of the band Tool. They're kind of like a prog metal band. And then I realized that Tool in Japanese is Tool, but my friend was calling it Chul, like the cat food, churu, right? And so I asked one of the, oh, can I share the screen, Jennifer? I asked it to make a Tool style album cover, but with Chul. And so let me just show you what I came up with. Let's see here. So can you see that?
Yeah.
This is the Tool style, Chul style artwork. So I really liked it. I think
it looks like the anemia cover.
yeah. I think it's hilarious and I really liked it. But some of the artists and musicians that I'm like friends or whatever with on Instagram and Facebook and everything are just really anti using AI generated visual art, but then also music is now real, like the past month even, right? Music has really become this kind of central thing. So I don't use, even though I love it, I was using it as my avatar for like forums or whatever, but I've kind of stopped using it just because I'm not comfortable using it. So, you know, you've kind of spoken, but any thoughts on that, on my Chul thing?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's creative expression, right? I think it's the nature and how you use it is what matters, right? Like if it brings you joy and it was a creative expression of yours, and you're not using it for commercial gain or trying to take away other people's livelihoods, my personal view is that it it's just an expression that's using the state of technology as it is today. My use of Suno to turn my Dharma messages into song is meant to connect at an emotional level where I may have the creative direction because I tell it like speed up here or beats per minutes there, or these kinds of vocals. I want an emotional build here, insert a break here, drop out drums, fade out. Here's what the outro should look like, right? And those tools are allowing you to have that kind of creative flexibility, but I'm not going to commercialize the music. The whole point of that experiment is that if I just read it on paper, but now I listen to it in a different way, it's another way of deep listening. I was talking to George Tanabe from BDK Hawaii, and he took that Echoes in the Tide and he's shared it with other people who have recently lost people. And he's like, he tells me that some of the first responses that he gets is just tears, right? Because it's listening to this message about, loss, but them not being that far away, the idea of the ocean and tides, right? So it's like an emotional response instead of just reading a message. And again, like the way I think this kind of music generation also works is that it provides the inspiration because are you familiar with stemming out music? So
Like,
you can
so you can
take
have just
out,
the drum part or just the bass or whatever. Yeah.
exactly. So Suno will now generate the music, but you can stem out the vocals, percussion, the bass line, the guitar, piano, whatever. And you can put that into your music editor. And the way they talk about it is this gives you an inspiration of what the beat could look like. And then you play it with real instruments and real musicians and convert it into the way that you want it. My hope on the Dharma remix is that that music inspires people to create many of their own remixes as action musicians and give their take on trying to talk about this message in the same way. And you have a bunch of ways of interpreting it. Again, I think to me, like the core of deep listening is to listen and listen and listen continuously from different angles because who I am today is not who I am tomorrow. So if community was able to contribute to that, I think it kind of proves out what this experiment is hoping to be.
Could you look at there's two comments that are related. Could you take a look at those, or I can read them? The first from Moss: my daughter's writings were scraped for many of the LLMs, and she's totally anti-Gen AI.
She's totally anti-Gen. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, I think about my creative material. I don't want it to go back into training the model either. So I don't know how we can protect against that, especially when it gets out into the public domain. Like I said, Pandora's box is open, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's still getting figured out. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
But in context of Dharma School, this is why I'm saying we do need to scrape, but we need to scrape from doctrine. We need to scrape from the canon. We need to scrape from ministers. We need to scrape from the truths, and then attribute them appropriately.
Reverend Adams has his hand raised.
Maybe was that were you going to look at the other question too?
Oh yeah, Stacy noted that on that note, AI company. This is a previous note, I think. AI companies are profiting from the creations, right? So by me
AI
using
companies
it,
are
yeah,
correct. That's true. I mean, if you trace it all back, the AI company OpenAI is making money from people using their models. Yeah, I think it's a really hard argument. I think there's a lot of ethics and a lot of questions that are left unanswered. I think the things that personally what I think though is that we need to use it responsibly. And for the kinds of things that we are thinking about in context of Dharma School, if it helps us present the Dharma and expand the reach of the Dharma in new, creative, novel ways to make it more effective, why not adapt to the times, right? mean, there are always going to be ethical questions and like how we work around that. But I think if we approach it responsibly, this could be something that could be very useful for our continuation with the Dharma.
And I was just thinking like hip hop. When hip hop started and people were sampling, scratching records and stuff, there was kind of an uproar. At the same time, people were using stuff and not attributing the originals. And that music people didn't stop sampling, right? We're still sampling and yet attributing, this is the James, we use James Brown here and whoever here and whoever here. So that's maybe kind of an interesting example of something similar that's
Sure.
actually been, but it took working through. It took personal responsibility on the part of the people,
Yeah.
and people still have to, the lawyers are still keeping an eye out for when someone doesn't attribute it, right? And, recognizing the sample, but yeah.
Yeah, and I can go back to the Dharma and Silk title page. Now I'll have to put, inspired from the Oregon Trail, right? But again, to your point, Stacy, like that's a very effective approach to maybe teaching in an interactive way that meets the students and mediums that they practice with every day, to teach them something different and tie it back to the Dharma. And it was something that I had the creativity to think about, but not the technical skills to execute on it quickly.
Reverend Adams, can we get to Reverend Adams's
Sure,
question?
please.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this really, to me, sort of further highlights a need for us to think about kind of the different spaces in which Dharma School exists. Like a lot of the online, sort of interactive games, music, things like that. I mean, that's a space that our students inhabit for much of the day. But it's a screen. It's kind of screen engagement to me. So that's maybe one space in which they're spending a lot of time, and then we can perhaps provide Dharma School in that space. But to me, for like when kids come to the temple, traditionally on Sunday or whenever, I try to really limit I don't do very much PowerPoint in my Dharma talks. I try to kind of limit that screen experience and just be like a living, breathing human being in the room with them. And then, even outside of, like the nothing makes me happier than to see that kids can still, like, nothing is funner to this day, it seems, than a staircase, like a flight of stairs. And like a 2-level, like a lot of our temples have these like 2-level things where they just do these like laps running up and down the stairs. Or, I mean, I was at San Jose the other day for a Cub Scout meeting. And like all these kids were like, like they got their phones or whatever, but at one point they put down the phone and there's like this rickety old chair that's just sitting out in front of the building. And it's like an old rolling office chair. And they just like 10 kids just pushing each other back and forth on this old office chair for like 15 minutes and like just having like the greatest time in their lives. And it's like, these are total digital natives, but somehow like an office chair from 1993 is like the funnest thing they've seen all day. And so to me, I think that's something I like to prioritize in Dharma School, that sort of just in person, running around in the parking lot, that kind of experience is, as a parent, like nothing makes me happier than my kids having fun, not on a screen at this point in my life.
Sure. And just as a quick response to that, everything that I presented was not meant for AI to replace all one-on-one interaction, right? I 100% agree with you that there needs to be that human element. And that's what I tried to keep central to all of those things. And if you recall from one of those examples that I put into ChatGPT, it was give me 5 ideas on how to engage them in the classroom, right? So it's like basically saying, I have a rickety chair. How can I incorporate that into a lesson around the 6 realms, right? We could sit down and think about it, but wouldn't that thinking be perhaps made easier if I said, give me 10 ideas and I cherry pick the best aspect of those 10 ideas and then I invent my own rickety chair game through the realms, right? So the generative AI process to me is not meant to replace one-on-one human interaction or that human connection to the Dharma, but it's meant to think about things in a different way that might enhance how we go about that connection. But I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, please don't take this as technology must reign supreme, right? Because I'm definitely not on that bandwagon.
Mhm, mhm. No, if I could say, I think your presentation was really inspiring. I have had an idea for years. I used to like the choose your own adventure books you can get
Yes.
on the paperback rack at,
Yep.
the local drugstore or whatever. And I would
Hmm.
read that thing over and over. And I remember I was like 11 or something, and just when some of them were dark, and you die and
Yeah.
you're like, or you're lost in this valley, doomed to
Yeah.
wander to forever. The end, you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
So today during your talk, I asked it, could you make a choose your own adventure style
Hmm.
story using the six
Yeah.
paramitas? And it didn't do it the way I would do it necessarily, but even making that first step is a further step
Yeah.
than I can do on my own, just because of my own personal issues with writing and procrastination and starting a creative venture like that. So I think, yeah, we definitely, you've opened my eyes to a lot of different ways to think about and approach and use it to help us think in different ways than I'm stuck in from being a minister for 15 years or whatever, or being a Dharma school teacher for 20 years, right? To be able to break out of that a little bit.
And it's a very iterative process. There's
Mm,
your first pass. Oh,
mm,
that's
mm, mm,
great. But what happens if we had less focus on that aspect of paramitas and think about it in this way? My objective for this whole game or the story, interactive story, is to get to this concept. How do I make sure that those paths
mm,
lead to this? Right. So it's like as you get back, you have to continuously interrogate it, you have to continuously evolve it, and it just becomes a better and better thing.
mhm,
One of the things that we did at Ekoji was we created escape rooms. So I
mm,
don't know if you have Amazon Alexa, but if you ask it to play escape room, it will
mm,
play a word game with you saying you're in the car and your hands are locked in handcuffs or something like that. And then you'll have to do things like say, look under the floor mat,
mm,
pull down the visor. Oh, keys fall down. Oh, see if the keys fit in the handcuffs, right? And it doesn't.
mm, mm,
So we created like a room where you had to get out, and it was about the four noble truths and
mm,
and characteristics of life because we have this like cosmology chart of like how all these things fit, and we had different challenges in the room that you would only use your imagination
mm.
to try to solve these different puzzles that would end up allowing you to open the cell door and get out.
Wow.
This is like the kind of thing where we want to translate that into something that maybe Gen AI could make even more effectively.
Mhm. Can we go to Maya? Maya has a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, not so much a question. I just more comments as some of the discussion has been rolling on. I think it's really interesting to me, right? I think the idea of augmenting how we teach Dharma School with AI as a companion, right, as an aid, I think is like Brant knows very well, I am more of a noob in the AI space, right? Like I have done some very basic, I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise going on behind me. I don't know if this is like coming through because I know
It's fine. It's actually not that loud.
Okay, good. The connection's not that super stable. But like I think about some of the ways that we've adapted games for Ekoji's Dharma School, right? Like we took Candyland and made it into a like Buddha Land style game. And there's different ways that we've tried to adapt sort of known activities that the kids are familiar with and then use it in a Dharma School context, right? So to me, the idea of using AI as an enabler is not that different from, and it's helpful, right? Especially as, like at Ekoji, we've had a lot of trouble like recruiting new teachers. And some of us, right, so I've been teaching Dharma School now for 20 years and taught like almost every one of our class levels. And you get really stale after a while, right? Like you start using games like over the course of classes. But I feel like AI gives us a different way to be able to generate new games. And, Brant and I are co-teaching the advanced level class for our Dharma School, where the kids are, like, as they're going through late middle school and high school, they are starting to also have to think about how they use AI in the classroom, right? So maybe we're not having them on their screens in class, not intentionally, although I do see some of the students like, silently pulling out their phones if they're getting bored or whatever. But I can see ways for, like, one of the things that we try to instill in them is that the Dharma is all around us, right? It's all around us every day, as long as it's up to you to recognize the call and whatnot, right? So I could see cases where maybe we would be talking about a concept in class, and as homework, we could tell the kids, go home, like by our next class, come back with an image that you've generated or a poem that you've generated, with the help of AI or on your own, right? Because some kids are more creative than others. And bring that back to class, and let's talk through how you think that this thing that you have created reflects the teachings that we talked about today, right? It's a potential way to have the kids reflect on what we taught, but have them have to express it in their own way. Whether they use AI or not, right, is up to them. But when they bring that thing back, I think it also can create opportunities for conversations that also bring in some of the Buddhist teachings, right? This idea of, LLMs scrape from the internet, the world of the internet, right? And so we can talk about all the causes and conditions that have allowed the use of AI to be able to help us, enable us in some of these lessons. Or we can talk about gratitude, or like, I feel like it creates new opportunities and touch points to help create the responsible users that we want the kids to be, and to help sort of talk through some of the critical thinking steps about really thinking about the origination of some of the concepts that they're pulling from, and how the Dharma, there's interplay with the Dharma in there. But I do think it is, especially as it is hard to find, to keep recruiting and maintaining a core stable of Dharma school teachers who grew up in the Dharma, right? It's pretty rare now here at Ekoji. So we're learning as we're going for a lot of our teachers. And like, the more help that we can get in not having to force the teachers to rely on their own sort of stable of known lived experiences and games and activities and what might be relevant for kids at different ages, right? The more tools that we can give them and enable them to just then interact with the students in a meaningful way and help them understand the Dharma from where they are, I think that's where I see AI as being an enabler.
And Reverend Bridge, if it's okay, I have a real quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
I think to respond to Maya and also to Stacy about part of the accountability piece, and how information is being scraped without permission, and how do we attribute, and those kinds of things. I think Maya hit on some themes about what do you do in those situations where you have to attribute, or where you're scraping it down. And I think it comes down to how you constructively use it, right? Towards that explanation piece, part of one of the organizations I interact with is West Point Academy, and they have a tradition called briefing the board, right? Where in the mathematics department, they take turns, and it's like, all right, put your homework on the chalkboard and state your case, right? So they have to put up their math, they put up the problem, then they have to brief it. I did this equation in this way because of this, and I carried this thing over here, and that interacted with these variables, and even though this thing says this number, here's what I think it actually means, and how I interpret it, and why. And here's the impact from that, right? So what they're moving towards now is briefing the bot, right? So it's saying, you have this resource, it helps you think in different ways, but you have to be cautious about it. You have to be a critical thinker. So here's a problem. Go ahead and use ChatGPT, use GenAI, use whatever you want. But as part of your solution, now you have to get up in the front. Instead of briefing the board, you're briefing the bot. I started off with this idea. GenAI came in and it used these sources, or from places I'm not exactly sure, but here's the concepts of the ideas it brought back, how it changed my approach. These are the pieces of it that I actually took and appreciated. So I use that as part of my solution. Here's how that changed my thinking. Here's how the outcomes have changed because of it. And I accept this as fact and a way forward because of this. Now, here are some caveats I need to think about, but this is what I think the implications are from the outcome, and this is why I think this needs to happen, right? So AI and LLMs as a partner to inspire and like change your thought to be attributed for, but it's something that you're using truly as a partner just to carry on your thoughts. And I think that contributes to that critical thinking, the accountability you want to pass on to the students. So just as a follow on to what Maya's talking about.
Thank you. I have to get going, but I think I'll pass it back to Moss, and Moss can keep moderating because I think there's probably more that people want to talk about. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Brant, especially. And yeah, keep going.
Thank you, Reverend Bridge.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Stacy?
Okay, Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, just on that last comment from Brant, I acknowledge that I think I just really want to emphasize that as someone who works with 112, 13-year-olds every day, they are not responsible users. I mean, they are not responsible users. They have, we have every day there's increasing issues of, kind of cheating when they're supposed to be writing something on their own. And I think also, I don't know if you agree, Brant, but some of the generative AI that helps with literature and history maybe it's just harder because it's not math, like it's just there's so many perspectives and there's a lot of bad sources out there, so it just is I really agree with your comment about really modeling responsible ethical use of it, because the students need a lot of training and practice to be responsible and ethical about it, because they will just automatically go to kind of making mischief with it and using it the wrong way.
Hey, you wrote about this event and you presented an argument about this implication on this outcome of the war or battle or a pivotal turning point. Tell me more about it. Why do you feel that way? Why don't you defend your paper, right? Tell me more about that. And I think there's other things where maybe if there's in classroom writing, and then you're saying, well, here's what you submitted when you were on your own. Here's what you submitted when you wrote it in class. These grammar patterns are a little bit different, right? Call them out.
Yeah, that's that's exactly what I had to do this week. I just had to show the student, like, this is, this doesn't look like your own ideas, and you have to, and we usually do this big research project where the students get to pick any topic they want, and they get to create these genres like brochures and pamphlets and websites and stuff. But generative AI has really changed what we will have to assess, because they could easily just create that all very quickly.
Sure.
So now I think your suggestion is correct. Like I think that's where we're going to have to go. Is they're almost going to have to kind of defend it more, right? And show, which is a whole different skill. A lot of students, speaking it through, it's pretty challenging for them. Having to think on the spot, that's challenging for many of us. So it is. You're right. It's changing, and I think we have to kind of meet the change. But it's something. I just want to acknowledge it is really something for a writing teacher and a history teacher right now.
Sure. Yeah. No, I totally appreciate that, and I think the other thing I want to just make sure you pass on to you is that please don't feel like you're alone in these challenges. This is something that's being faced by educators across the world. So there are conferences, there are papers, there are presentations that I'll keep an eye out for them as well, and I'll send them to you if I find any. But this is definitely something that is, you're not alone, and I'm sure that there's tips and tricks that are out there. But briefing the bot, I think is really a great way to start.
Yeah.
And then they won't feel like they're prohibited or feel like they're dirty for using it, right? Again, it's the world they're inheriting. It's going to be a fact of life. Go ahead and use it if you need to, but be prepared for some critical questions that you're going to have to respond on the fly.
Yeah, my brother actually teaches at community college. He teaches sociology, and the way he uses it is he basically gives an option to use it, but if you use it, you have to basically give a critique, an additional critique in person about that the thing that you wrote. So it turns out that the vast majority of his students actually do attempt to use it. And then they actually have to, of course, do the critique. And then they find that it's actually pretty difficult. So some actually revert back to actually writing. So.
And in that case too, let's say you use Gen AI to come up with a strategy or responses or things to prepare for on my critique. If I'm still doing it in person, I've internalized that and I can put my own spin on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you learned how to defend it, and
That's
you are
right.
using it without ChatGPT right there next to you, right? It's just a different way of learning. And again, I think it comes
That's
back
right.
to deep listening.
Oh, are there any other questions, especially from people who we haven't heard from? Oh, I see Reverend Adams, a comment. Blue books are coming back. Yes, I've heard that as well. And yeah, there were issues with the flyer, so my apologies for that. And oh, Reverend Adams, go ahead.
Yeah, I think also just something that occurs to me as using these things is there's there even in within Buddhism, and I appreciate that Brant sort of his sort of interface recognizes that he has this Jodo Shinshu orientation, but I think the way that I notice the way that it talks about a lot of things is has a strong kind of Vipassana undercurrent where it talks about like, oh, notice the tension in your jaw, or this feelings of heat and things like that. That's really like a Vipassana kind of one very dominant way that Buddhism is talked about in the English language. And so I think it sort of behooves us to be sort of mindful of the way that if we ask questions about Buddhism, that the information we're going to get back from what's scraped on the total internet information in English is going to have a certain orientation, where Jodo Shinshu is really a kind of minority perspective. So and I think that ways to approach that would be, you can say, well, and also look at Japanese language materials on this, or just as you say, kind of direct it, like, I am a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist. And also, but you could also say, because I use Claude more than ChatGPT, but it's very like attuned to what's there in like the Japanese body of information too, where I think if you ask it for Japanese takes on Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu perspective is really strong. And so you can kind of, you can sort of direct it again, I think in the spirit of directing it and it's sort of like I once heard, these tools as like a very hardworking and competent but naive assistant.
Yes, that's right.
That's
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so one of the I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you off, am I?
No, I'm done. Thanks.
Okay. One of the idealistic dreams that I think I have of what could be possible is there is a method called fine tuning, human in the loop fine tuning, where you basically take a large language model and you feed it just the right information and tweak it to a certain perspective to emphasize some things and not. Imagine if there ended up being a Jodo Shinshu repository of information that was very highly attuned to all of our temple newsletters, all of our video recordings of Dharma messages, but from Shin leaders, right? Translations of Japanese texts, etc. So what you fine-tuned it is on a foundational knowledge of the world and Buddhism as foundations, but fine-tuned for the nuance of this protected repository of everything that we put into it, saying these are the things that are most important to us, right? And then you sit the LLM on top of that. And if you made that available now to our community, that would be something different. All the precautions still exist, but maybe you start from a better point, right? After the question. I think that's feasible. It's not a light lift at all, but who knows? As technology changes, maybe it becomes easier and easier to do. But I don't think it's something we take off our radar. I think it's entirely feasible and something that might be important for us.
It's not that bad.
Collection of and curation of all the data in a way that an LLM can sit on top of it. I think it'll be an effort for sure.
Oh, it'll be an effort.
Yeah.
But it's not trivial, but it's not hard. It's just effort.
It's less about it also being hard, but it's also, I think, about buy-in and vested interest by our community, right?
Absolutely.
I think
absolutely true.
What I would hope after this presentation is that maybe some of the biases or the initial impressions that you had about AI and its role within the Dharma education is changed in some way because of maybe a different perspective, right? Because again, I'm not espousing like AI should overtake everything that we do, but as an enhancing tool, used in creative ways to inspire and change the ways that we do deep listening for our students, I think there's a lot of different possibilities here. And my 4 use cases are just scratching the surface.
Okay. It's 10:57 and I'd love to continue this. However, I think it's time that I need to let people go. First of all, I would really, really like to thank Brant because without him, this presentation would not be possible. And I really appreciate his enthusiasm about the topic. Yeah, I see all the hands. That's fantastic. And I also would like to thank Reverend, I'm blanking out. Reverend Bridge, because he actually fit this in between one meeting or something and a service that he has to conduct. And that's, you probably noticed that he was actually at the Oakland Buddhist Church. So yeah, he literally said, I really want to do this. And yeah, and I really want to thank Reverend Adams too for being here because I really appreciate his comments. Not just the fact that he's going to be my Rinbam pretty soon.
Yes, thank you so much for all the engagement, Reverend Adams, and it's good to see you again after the Ekoji family reunion.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
So let me do one thing really quickly. I'd like to get a feedback form, and the way I'm going to do this is by, let's see, I think I should have it. Here we go. People should see it soon. Yep, you guys should see it. So if you can get that, just use that QR code, you'll be able to go to feedback form and like to get information back from how you felt about this presentation. One other thing that I need to mention is that the workshop, we actually had a workshop 1 with Reverend Opal about propagation, how to improve propagation of materials in Dharma School, how to engage the children, students. So that is actually available at bcadharmaschool.org. And then finally, when this presentation or this recording is concluded and we have it all fixed up so it looks nice, we will have it also at bcadharmaschool.org. And with that, I'd like to ask Reverend Adams to lead us in closing Gassho.
Please join me in Gassho. Naman David's Naman
Naman
David's
David's,
Naman
Naman
David's
David's,
Naman
David's,
Naman David's. If anyone wants to hang on, I'd be interested to see what Shunan and Shakyamuni had to say.
Okay. I'm going to stop the recording.
Sure.